United Methodist Church Global Ministries General Secretary Thomas Kemper talked about his personal experience surviving the Istanbul airport attack earlier this year. He shared his thoughts on the role of religion in combating terrorism and promoting peace, and outlined the missionary work and humanitarian assistance his agency provides. From the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., this is about 45 minutes.
Okay, good morning. Good morning and welcome to the National Press Club, where news happens and has happened for over 108 years. I'm David Hodes, Deputy Chair of the club's Newsmakers Committee and organizer and moderator of this morning's Newsmaker Press Conference. Inside the international terminal at the Istanbul Ataturk airport on the evening of Tuesday, June 28th, was Thomas Kemper, the General Secretary or CEO of the General Board of Global Ministries of the United Methodist Church, who was napping in a transit lounge when three men arriving by taxi began firing guns at the terminal entrance as they made their way inside the airport. The terrorists were quickly shot by security, then blew themselves up, leaving behind 239 people injured and 42 people killed. This horrific attack was another in a series of terrorist attacks in Turkey in the past year. According to the New York Times, Kurdish and Islamic State militants have staged at least 14 major attacks across Turkey, killing more than 280 people. To Thomas Kemper, our speaker today, this horrific event that he witnessed and survived has become transformative for him personally. He leads an agency of the United Methodist Church with operations and partners in more than 125 countries. His moments, together with other survivors of the attack, people of many nationalities and cultures, has brought to him a renewed determination to connect with people of all faiths and nationalities and examine what it means to be human, to be understanding, to care about strangers who all want to feel safe and all want to be able to live their own lives. It's this moment of transformation and a lasting, deeper sense of the importance of the dedication he brings to his mission in life that he will be discussing this morning. Just a few procedural notes before I turn the floor over to Mr. Kemper. Please remember to turn your cell phone to mute or turn off any noise-making device. Once Mr. Kemper has completed his remarks, I will open the floor to questions. Priority will go to Credential Media and National Press Club members. So when you are called on to pose a question, please identify yourself by name and organization. Mr. Kemper.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for this invitation and the opportunity to speak to you. I want to say I'm really grateful to the journalists. The experience in Istanbul has also changed my view of journalists. It started that night with Anderson Cooper and the way he interviewed and the possibility to not only just give some sensationalist background of what had happened and eyewitness report, but also to be able to express something which I felt inwardly and also as a person of religion and faith. So thank you for this, and it's exciting to be here. Why were I in Istanbul? That was a question many people ask. And really, I was there on a layover. There's nothing more dramatic to it. I wasn't even there to visit some of our partners in Istanbul. I was there because I had a layover on the way to Japan, and I had chosen to fly Turkish Airlines, and that had brought me to the lounge. So that was the reason I was there. But I'm traveling a lot because you can see here on the map, Global Ministries is the mission and the development and disaster response arm of the United Methodist Church. And we have projects, as you just said, in 125 countries. We have over 350 missionaries. So traveling, being in airports is part of my daily life. Global Ministries understands itself as a humanitarian network, as a network of global health, global mission connections around the world. To give you some highlights of our work, very briefly, so you understand the context where I come from. Here, this is a picture from the Kurdistan region of Iraq, where through UMCOR, the United Methodist Committee on Relief, we work to supply food and give food aid to internally displaced people in Iraq from the Iraq War. And this work is being done together with the International Blue Crescent, the Muslim partner organization of the International Red Cross, based in Turkey. Another example is our work in Bangladesh. We have just approved a grant, and here you see the first results for recovery work after the cyclone there. And these children are now able to go back to school on this path which was constructed. And here our partner is Muslim Aid. So you see there is a partnership with other faith organizations, especially in countries where it would be more difficult as a Christian organization to be present and be in solidarity, especially after disasters. One big initiative of the United Methodist Church in the last years was what we called Imagine No Malaria, a campaign to raise funds, and we have raised $69 million for fighting deaths through malaria around the world. And what is important for us here as United Methodist, we are not doing this alone. We have partnered with a global fund in Geneva to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. And 28 million of the funds we have raised, we have pledged, and 20 million have already been given to the global fund. Because as Methodists, we are very clear we cannot do this alone. If we are not connected, if we not build partnerships, it's not working. So we were blessed to have the UN Foundation and the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation to give us a startup also for this campaign. So far from our side, we have, can say, impacted 4.6 million lives through net distribution, through training of midwives, of traditional birth attendants, community health workers, especially in Africa. And we are now moving this campaign into the next step, where we hope to reach 1 million children with life-saving interventions. As part of a worldwide campaign, the UN calls it Every Woman, Every Child, Reducing Child Mortality. And this is part of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, which the world community has agreed on. And we as Methodists want to be part and do our part in this effort. So we hope to reach 1 million children with life-saving interventions, ensure safe births, promote breastfeeding, promote children's health and wholeness, and treat childhood diseases and illnesses. And in order to be not just somebody and an organization that helps somewhere else, but we also recognize there are health challenges, there are issues here, right here in the United States. So as part of the campaign, we are challenging our churches that we find 10,000 churches in the next 4 years that sign up and are ready to engage in some health-related work and ministry in their community, in their neighborhood, where this church is situated. It could be a physical activity, healthy diet and nutrition, tobacco and drug-free living, or issues around mental health education and mental health promotion. If you only look at this one number here about obesity, it has risen 2 times in children and 4 times in adolescents here in the United States in the last 30 years. So we have serious health issues also in this country, especially for children and young people. And as part of our work, we have missionaries, and I wanted to be very clear. These missionaries may look very different from what traditional people still think missionaries are. We call them missionaries from everywhere to everywhere. A minority today are from the United States. Here we have a program in the Congo with our United Methodist Church where we have an aviation ministry, several planes, small Cessna planes, which can reach any part of the Congo, and they fly medical supplies, they do evacuation missions. They are an essential part of the ministry of the church, and they are run and they are maintained by missionaries of global ministries. Back to this fateful day in June in Istanbul. As I said, I was on a layover. It was just there to rest at this airport, and here you see the lounge. This was a picture I took when everybody had left already after the attack in that part. I was there, really, the lounge is a place of safety. You go there, you feel much calmer. I was really lying out, stretched out. I had taken off my shoes, and I was sleeping, waiting for my next flight. And while I was sleeping, suddenly I heard this blast, you know, very loud, and then shooting. And you don't think it's happening. I mean, at this moment, I really thought it's a film, it's a dream, it's a nightmare. But then people started running, I mean, by the bench where I was lying, like in real panic. So I didn't think much. I just grabbed my shoes. I didn't put them on. I grabbed my bag and started running as well. But then people came towards us from the other direction, and we almost stumbled over each other. We crashed into each other, and when you can see this here, what really happened, we didn't know at that moment. Only later we found out about it. There were 3 bombs almost at the same time. So it was not surprising that at the lounge where the red file is pointing, there was a bomb very close to us, and there was glass and shattered glass and everything in the lounge. But when we started running away from it, we ran into the direction where the other bomb had gone off. So it created an incredible panic for all of us. And I was really scared. And what I think is in the minds of everybody, okay, the bomb has gone off, the panic is there, but now they come for you. It's this image since Orlando, since Paris, which was in my mind, I think was in the mind of the people there. Where are these terrorists now? We had no information. We didn't know these were suicide bombers. We heard shooting, we heard bombing, so we thought now they come for us. So this was a room where I was hiding. It was behind the kitchen in the lounge. I found a little room. There was an Asian man. We couldn't communicate, but we saw the fear in our eyes. And we were hiding in this room here. And others, there was a young man from France. I talked to him later. He was there with his girlfriend. He grabbed a chair and banged it against the glass windows, trying to get out, because we were kind of trapped in that corner of the airport. Everybody trying to hide, everybody trying to find a place to live and to survive. And I posted from there shortly after, and that really started this whole media interest and the conversations and the many opportunities to speak. And what I said here was, very scary, I'm safe now, but terror coming so close lets me give thanks for my life, my family, and calls us to fight hate and terror everywhere. And it leads us into deeper solidarity with all who experience terror and violence, not just once, but every day and every night. That was really very deep inside me, that I felt, for me, this moment. I was terribly scared. I panicked. I was doing things just out of instinct, and I was terrified. But I saw there are people who experience this every day and every night. I don't know whether you have had a chance to listen to this audio. It was in the New York Times a few days ago from Aleppo. Just 2-3 minutes. The bombing, the shelling. If you hear this every day and every night, how can we be more solidarious with people who experience it every day and not just once, like it was in my case? And also, as we were hiding and then being guided out of the airport into the even more chaos outside, I met people who opened my eyes, how especially Muslims are mostly victimized by this terrorist violence. I sat next to a young woman who was had a headscarf, was covered. I would not have spoken to her, but she cried so much. So I started talking, and she spoke some English. And she told me, you know, I am from Istanbul. I was here only to see off a friend at the airport. But then the bomb went off, and I started running. And now I'm at the wrong side, because they did not let people out without showing a passport. They wanted to catch any remaining terrorists. So it took hours and hours to leave the airport. So she was there on the wrong side, because she started running, and now she had no passport. And she didn't know what was going to happen in the midst of this chaos. I was with a young man who was sitting next to me. We started talking, and then I met the whole family. He was from Egypt, and he had just been, his family had visited him, and they were on their way back. He had finished his tourism studies in Bologna in Italy, a Muslim family from Egypt, scared. And all of us wanted to see our families again. All of us wanted to live and wanted to survive. I felt an incredible connectedness with all these people. And as we moved out, we had to go through baggage claim and then really through the area where the bombing had happened. We moved out, and we passed the conveyor belts where people had left their luggage because they were not able to claim it. And I passed, and it's probably difficult to see it, but this is a flight from Brussels. And I couldn't believe it. There were these non-claimed suitcases, this non-claimed baggage from Brussels, where the last attack at an airport had happened. And we had actually two of our directors from the Board of Global Ministries who are from Africa. They had made the connection that day in Brussels and were stuck for a week. So again, there was this connection to people who had gone through an experience like this right there when I saw the flight from Brussels and the unclaimed baggage. Outside, we were all put into buses. It was extremely well organized. I mean, it was extremely chaotic. But if you think what had just happened with so many people injured, so many deaths, the chaos in the airport, the Turkish authority worked really hard to allow us to get to hotels. So this was a bus I was traveling with. And the two ladies in front of me, which you can see there, we were together here at the back, together with their family. And we started talking together about our shared experience. And you won't believe it, they were from Holland, as they lived as refugees in Holland, were on their way to Mogadishu in Somalia. And the son who was sitting next to me, who spoke good English, he said, "What the heck?" I mean, he just couldn't believe it, how this could happen to a Somali in Istanbul. Because that's what they were used in Mogadishu. And he said, this is happening everywhere. These terrorists are attacking us now everywhere. And it came from a Somali who was sitting there with me in the bus, and we were traveling together to the hotel. And then, as I had said, this post led to a first interview on that night with Anderson Cooper on his 360 show on CNN. And it was so interesting that I believe through this message where I tried to say that we needed to come together as people of faith and people of non-faith if we want to really make a difference and overcome violence and terror and hate in this world, that I got so many invitations to speak and to share this experience. And they opened up also to share this from a perspective of faith and from a call to a shared responsibility as leaders of faith. So that night, in the next 24 hours, there were interviews with CNN, Al Jazeera, MSNBC, the BBC, and even Vatican Radio interviewed this Methodist at that occasion. And for me, it was an opportunity to cope with the situation because I could talk about it, I could digest it, and it opened really for me a window to say we as global ministries, we as people of faith have to stand together. We really have to share in our humanity, in our shared humanity, to work for difference. I got back to the lounge 2 days later, and when we look into what have I learned, what do we want to do as an organization in the future, I came back to the lounge 2 days later because my flight to Japan was gone, the meeting had ended, I was going home. And there were still traces of the attack, shattered glass. They had done an incredible job, started to repair and do everything, but you could still see the traces. And I went back to the lounge, and what was surprising to me, I didn't feel secure. Although everything looked like normal. People were working on their laptops, they're having breakfast, they were talking to each other, reading the newspaper. But I wanted to cry and say to them, don't you know what happened here 2 nights ago? I was here for hours and I feared for my life. And that night I connected to so many people who were there. And now it's life as if nothing has happened. And I felt more lonely at that moment in the apparent security of that moment because I was not able to connect at that moment. And that led me to this thought which I want to share with you. There are really 2 paths to safety, I feel. One is a path through connection, and the other is a path through separation. And I lived for many years in Brazil. I was myself a missionary there. And we have all this locked story out now. Did he lie? Did he not lie? But everybody could imagine something like that could happen in Brazil. Violence is a daily experience for people there. And this is a picture from Brazil. gated communities, higher walls, and I was there in the 70s, and it already started in the 80s, but every time I go back to Brazil, the walls are higher, the security systems are more sophisticated, but it doesn't stop the violence. The separation is not able to transform the society into a safer place, and Brazil is an example for this. During our time of the Ebola crisis, there was this incident, a few of you may have read about it, where the Liberian government in Monrovia sealed off a whole slum area from one second to the other out of fear of Ebola, because there were cases of Ebola. And then an extremely violent clash broke out, which created even more Ebola cases because as people touched each other, fought with each other. And it only changed when the approach of the government changed from separation to, of course, separating the ill and the diseased, but in a way which left them connected with the community, which explained and trained and entered into communication with them. So safety through separation, in this case again, can lead to more and not less violence. So this experience in Istanbul, really, we walking out here out of the airport, this was right after the attack, as we were waiting for the buses, thousands and thousands of people, this feeling of being connected with of so many different cultures and faiths and no faith at all, led to this quote, which I found with Brené Brown, who has this TED Talk on vulnerability and also a book where she says, vulnerability is the birthplace of connection and the path to the feeling of worthiness. If it doesn't feel vulnerable, the sharing is probably not constructive. Vulnerability as the birthplace of connection. Could this be for us a path to safety? Could this for us to be a path to overcome hatred and violence if we are ready to share our vulnerability? If we are ready to share our vulnerability in order to connect across different faiths, across different cultures and countries? During the Ebola crisis, I already quoted it, one very interesting experience was a joint task force of the religious leaders. The chair was the Bishop of the United Methodist Church in Sierra Leone, John Yambasu, who is also a vice president of our board. So we were very intensely connected with this whole effort. And the religious leaders in Sierra Leone at that time came together because there was a need for technical responses. You needed a safe suit to be able, as a professional, medical professional, to treat people. You needed to build hospitals from the ground quickly with military help in order to treat patients. But it was equally important to work for behavioral change, for changing the burying rites, because people in Africa, deaths and funerals are extremely important, and to touch the dead and to wash them and to prepare them for the funeral is something for generations which had been done with the blessing of the imams and the pastors. So to tell them not to do it without the blessing of the religious leaders, without the theological accompaniment of them, would not have been possible. So the religious leaders doing this together, preaching this together, was essential for combating Ebola at that time. And of course, you can see this in the picture, you didn't touch each other when you met in the street, which is a revolution in Africa. Anytime you meet an African in Africa, you touch, you greet, you hug, and not to do it. And they developed a whole culture of bowing and greeting people in a new way. And the religious leader led this movement. So this really reduced the infection rate during these months and the time of Ebola. Another example I wanted to give is where we have really found a good cooperation is with Muslim Aid, a London-based Muslim disaster relief and aid organization. We have worked in many parts. I showed you the picture from Bangladesh. This is from Sri Lanka, where I think the example and the model of two faith-based organizations from different faiths working together in a country which has gone through a long time of civil war between the North and the Tamils, Hindu-based, and the South, Buddhist, Sinhalese, is an example which helps people to connect and create an environment and a culture of safety and reconciliation in a country like this. And lastly, as a German, allow me to mention an example which came to me since Istanbul back in a very strong way. I would never have imagined in my lifetime that we would have a united Germany. That is something until 89 I would not have believed in. It was so clear that these were two systems, and there was a wall that separates these systems, and everybody was working on keeping us separate, and there would never have been unification. But one cornerstone of unification was what Willy Brandt at that time, and later he was our chancellor and then also won the Nobel Prize for his work, the famous Ostpolitik, the East politic, if you translate it literally. And Willy Brandt had this famous slogan, Wandel durch Annäherung, change through approximation. He made concessions, he made gestures of asking for forgiveness when he kneeled in Warsaw. He worked so that there would be family exchange and travel, and the wall became a little bit more easy to cross. And this created an atmosphere which was an important stone in this building of trust that later broke down the wall and the Iron Curtain. So he called it change through approximation. But I felt it really was within this idea that we can create safety through connection, even in the larger political context. The church also struggles. It would be, on the one hand, naive and not also very honest if I didn't say that the United Methodist Church struggles with the question of separation and connection, and that the church in general struggles with the question of separation and connection in many ways, in theological issues. And I normally, when I get on a plane, I grab some newspapers or magazines I haven't had time to read. So on the plane here, I read this. This is a Methodist Recorder. The Methodist Recorder is the oldest Methodist newspaper, and they call themselves the world's leading Methodist newspaper. It's published in London since, I don't know, many, many years. And they had this title a week ago, The Need for Vigilance. The Need for Vigilance. And I thought, isn't that interesting as I'm coming here to the press club? And it is in response to the Carmel in Rouen. And the statement here, which they quote, is from the British Methodist Church, and they say, we are reminding all our churches of basic security measures and of the need to be vigilant. However, our churches will continue to seek to offer a warm welcome to all. You feel the tension. And then the British government has just started 2 weeks ago a program for 8 weeks where places of worship can apply for government grants to make the places of worship more secure. You can get that application from the UK Guidance Places of Worship Security Funding Scheme. I thought, isn't this in a way ironic as I was talking about this, how we struggle between security, being vigilant, but then also our desire to keep the church open, to build relationship and offer a warm welcome to all. Another thing which happened early this week was that in East Congo, one of our district superintendents, a district superintendent is kind of the local leader of the United Methodist Church in that area, and his name is Ezekiel Mate. Ezekiel lost his 2 sisters in an attack by an Islamist Uganda-based militia in East Congo. This is ongoing for several months now. Over 500 people have been killed. You know that East Congo is probably one of the most violent regions in the world. Thousands and thousands of women have been raped as really an instrument of war. Thousands of people have been killed, and just recently over 500 in this region. And we had given a grant to this very superintendent a few months ago to rebuild some of the churches and some of the work which is being done in the aftermath of these attacks. And then last week he loses his 2 sisters in yet another attack from this Islamist group. What do I tell him? you connect. His impulse is probably to separate. So it's a challenge to make a connection in a situation where it's a matter of death and life, where you have experience in terror attack, and still we believe, and I believe strongly, that we need to work towards connection. I still believe that if we, in the end, want to overcome hatred and violence, we have to open ourselves up to risk, being vigilant, being cautious, but at the same time taking the risk to connect and taking the risk to build bridges and create this shared humanity with people who are different from us. The founder, one of the founders of the Methodist movement is Charles Wesley, who wrote a lot of hymns for Wesley followers, and we sing them all over the world until today. And a famous hymn for Advent, and Methodists sing this in Advent, but many other English-speaking Christians and others sing it in Advent as well. And it starts like this: "Come, thou long-expected Jesus, born to set thy people free. From our fears and sins release us. Let us find our rest in thee." It's an expression, and it's 300 years old. It's an expression of 300 years, we as Methodists and others believing in this hope that Christ relieves us from our fears, so that we are open to take risk, that we are open to build bridges, and that we create this community of people of faith and non-faith to create a world where connection is key and not separation. Come, thou long-expected Jesus, from our fears and sins release us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Thomas, for impassioned and interesting presentation. Now we're opening it up to questions from anybody here who would like to ask Mr. Kemper anything about what he presented or any other issues. Yes, sir.
You use the mic, yes.
Just a second.
Thank you, Thomas. I promise not to break into hymn singing here at the end.
Can you identify yourself in the
Yes,
organization?
I'm Mike McCurry. I'm from Wesley Seminary, also a member of the Press Club.
Yeah, Mike.
I'm curious, as you trace through this and think about the difference between separation and connectedness, if you could translate that work into what you do as the General Secretary of the Board of Global Ministries, is that causing you to think about program activity and where we direct the resources of the church and how we do this work? I mean, you've described missionism or missionalism is now a very different thing than what we think about it in terms of the sort of the culturally imperialistic times. But is this giving you a different sense of what the mission of global ministry should be for the Methodist Church?
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for the question. It's definitely something where we already, and I gave you some examples, where we're already trying to be connected and say we cannot go it alone. The Imagine a Malaria campaign was an example. We say we want to fight malaria deaths, especially in children, but we need to partner. We need the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria to join in this. So I think this is an attitude, it's an openness which should permeate all our programs and all the work we do. We are also introducing a stronger emphasis on interfaith dialogue in our training of missionaries, in our training of our own staff, so that they learn more of other faiths, but also lose some of the wrong perceptions or even prejudice we have because we have so few opportunities of exchange. So I think what is happening is that we are not necessarily creating a new program area, but in whatever we do, the emphasis on partnership, the emphasis on what we call a roundtable approach, where people sit around the table and jointly define priorities and ways for the work, and we are doing. I think that is something we are emphasizing more. And for instance, this work in Bangladesh with Muslim aid has really grown over the last years. So we are glad that since 2007 we have that relationship. But I think we have not appreciate it as much as I do it now after the Istanbul experience. So there is already something which we are doing, but we will intensify and expand this.
Good. Do you have a follow-up? No? Anyone else?
I've got the microphone, so I will ask I will ask a follow-up. There are several of us here from the Wesley Seminary community, but what thoughts do you have for theological education generally? We have, a whole group of institutions of higher learning that are preparing people who are going to go out. What kinds of curriculum or what kinds of program activity do we need to have within the ranks of theological education to kind of prepare for the world that you've now experienced and that you would like to change?
There has been a research done by the World Council of Churches, which had about 5,000 or 6,000 responses from around the world about what are the needs for theological education for future pastors in the 21st century. And the top result was cross-cultural communication and skills. That was first before New Testament or what you traditionally think. So that was a key element from all around the world where people said, if we live into this world now, we need to have the skills to go beyond our own comfort zone. We need to go beyond our own experience of religion and culture in order to be relevant in this world. So I think that is key for all theological education. So the exchange with other schools, not only Christian schools, the opportunities for students to have first-hand, real-life experience of other faiths and people of no faith, I think that is key in any theological education today.
Yes, please.
My name is David McAllister Wilson, president of Wesley Seminary, and I want to pick up on the work you do and what I might say are the two halves of what the board does. One you mentioned and shown in some of the slides, UMCOR, which is the emergency relief arm. But then there's the longer-term development arm, and I wonder if you'd comment on the connection between the two, maybe with a specific example. The young boy whose name I've forgotten, who is pictured now in the back of an ambulance in Aleppo, a powerful image. I imagine a whole lot of immediate response to that kind of image and that kind of attention. I imagine you're getting a lot of requests for support, people who want to support that child and that cause. But what do you do the next day and the next year and the next 5 years?
Our principle has been not necessarily to be everywhere on the ground ourselves. That is very, very important for us. There have been situations like in Haiti where you have a major specific disaster where we created an office, had a real presence as the United Methodist Committee on Relief. But for instance, in the Middle East, it's very helpful for us that we have trusted partners. We have worked before the war for many, many years. The Middle East Council of Churches, the Orthodox Relief and Development Committee. So these are partners of decades. So they come as trusted partners in these moments where almost nobody has entry anymore, and we can work with them because they're an established relationship. And this will not change. It will rather intensify in moments of crisis. But I think this policy to say it does not need to be us everywhere in person, but we vet our partners, we work with them, we build trust so we can immediately react in a moment of crisis because they are already on the ground, they know the culture, they speak the language, they are our hand and feet in that situation. I think that's the strength of our work for many, many, many years. And as I said, this is very often a Methodist church, a Methodist-related organization, but it could also be a Muslim organization if this is how we best can be in solidarity with the people in that situation.
Okay. Anyone else? I had a question for you, Thomas.
Yes.
What can people who are not necessarily men of God or missionaries do to help promote this mission of understanding and connecting this?
I think you don't need to be a missionary to be in mission of crossing cultures and going out to your neighbors. I mean, it is just probably be on the subway and greet somebody who looks different from you and have a word with that person, and that could make an incredible difference. I mean, my experience in the airport, I was a bit shy to talk to that woman who was so much covered, and you have all this idea she will never talk to you. But this moment brought us together, and we could talk and we could share, and she probably also felt comforted through this connection. So if anybody anywhere could reach out to people who look different, who have a different color, who may use a scarf, and try to create this bond, even in small gestures of communication, I think that could be a start of making a difference.
All right, do we have any more questions? Anyone? Okay. Thomas, do you have any last words you'd like to say?
No, I want to say thank you for the opportunity. I think it's just amazing. And as I said, I appreciate those journalists I had the chance to be interviewed, who were open to go beyond the sensational, who were open to give room for some conversation and some challenge, so that we all create an atmosphere which is more an atmosphere of trust building, an atmosphere of bridge building, than an atmosphere of fear. And that was an incredible opportunity. And I want to say thank you to those journalists, and they do their job so well. Thank you.
Okay, well, that wraps up this Newsmaker. Thank you all for attending today, and thank you, Thomas, for your presentation. It was very special.